On August 6, 1945, one city disappeared from the map: Hiroshima. Most people think they know this story: a bomb, a city, a war that ended. But here's the question almost nobody asks. Of every city in Japan, why that one? Because Hiroshima wasn't the only option. It wasn't even the first choice. There was a list. And in the final days, even the final hours, before the bomb fell, a series of decisions made by a handful of people quietly determined whose city would become the most famous name in the history of warfare. This is the story of how that list got shorter, and the story of the city that almost took Hiroshima's place. Japan was still fighting. American leaders were searching for a way to end the war, and by the summer of 1945, a new weapon was ready. For years, in total secrecy, American scientists had been racing to build a weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. And somewhere in Washington, a small group of men was handed an impossible task: pick the targets, the cities that would be hit with a weapon nobody had ever used before, in a war nobody knew how to end any other way. They called it the Target Committee. And the list they put together would decide which cities lived, and which one would become a word every person on Earth would eventually know. The Target Committee drew up their list using a simple logic: military value, industrial importance, and one more thing: psychological impact. They didn't just want a target that mattered strategically, they wanted a target that would shock the entire world into understanding what this weapon could do. Several cities made the list: Hiroshima, Kokura, Nagasaki, Yokohama, Niigata. And at the very top, sitting in the number one spot, Kyoto. For over 1,000 years, Kyoto had been the heart of Japanese civilization. Temples, palaces, centuries of art and history packed into a single city. To the Target Committee, that was exactly the point. They believed Kyoto's population was educated enough, cultured enough, to truly understand the significance of what was about to happen to them. In other words, Kyoto wasn't on the list despite its importance. It was on the list because of it. And it stayed there, until one man decided it wouldn't. His name was Henry Stimson. He was the United States Secretary of War, the man ultimately responsible for approving the final target list. And when Kyoto's name came across his desk, he said no. According to General Leslie Groves, the man running the entire atomic bomb program, Stimson made his position unmistakably clear. "I don't want Kyoto bombed." Stimson argued that Kyoto was the cultural soul of Japan, centuries of history, irreplaceable, a line he refused to let America cross. Groves pushed back. The military case for Kyoto was strong, and Stimson wasn't just overruling a suggestion, he was overruling his own targeting committee. But Stimson held the final say, and he used it. By his own account, written 2 years later, he said it plainly. With the president's support, he struck Kyoto from the list himself. He saved it because he simply refused to let it be destroyed. One man, using the authority of his office, crossed a city of over 1 million people off a list of atomic bomb targets. Just like that, Kyoto's name was gone, and another city moved up to take its place. With Kyoto removed, the final list settled into place: Hiroshima, Kokura, Nagasaki, backups in case something went wrong. Because here's the part most people never think about. Even on the morning of August 6th, even after months of planning, even with the bomb loaded and the crew in the air, nobody knew for certain which city was about to make history. It all came down to the sky. The mission required clear skies. The crew needed to see the target with their own eyes. No radar, no guesswork. If the primary target was covered in clouds, the plane would simply move on to the next one. So, ahead of the main aircraft, weather planes flew out first, one toward Hiroshima, one toward Kokura, one toward Nagasaki. Their job was simple: look at the sky and radio back one word that would decide everything. Over Hiroshima that morning, the message came through. Clear skies, proceed to primary target. If the clouds had been just a little thicker that day, if the report had come back differently, the plane would have turned toward Kokura instead. 3 days later, that almost happened, in reverse. When the second mission flew out, its primary target was Kokura. But by the time the aircraft arrived, clouds and smoke from a previous bombing run had drifted in and blotted out the city below. The crew circled, waited, burned fuel they didn't have to spare, and eventually they turned toward the secondary target instead. Nagasaki. 2 cities, 2 mornings. 2 decisions made in the air, in minutes, based on nothing more than which way the clouds happened to be drifting. So why Hiroshima? Not why the bomb. That decision had already been made in Washington weeks earlier. The real question is why that city, and not one of the others on the list. And when you actually trace it back, the answer isn't really about strategy at all. It's about a list that started with 12 cities and ended with 4, narrowed down by a Secretary of War who refused to let one of them be destroyed, no matter how strongly his own military advisors pushed back. And then it's about the weather, quite literally, which direction the clouds happened to be moving on 2 specific mornings in August. Somewhere in Japan, there's a city that was once at the very top of the target list, a city full of temples and history that still stand today, because one man said no. And in Kokura, there are descendants of people who never found out how close their city came to being the name we'd all remember instead. Hiroshima became one of the most famous place names in human history, but on 2 separate mornings, history almost gave that name to someone else. And that's the part that should keep you up at night.